why should drug companies be allowed to keep exclusive patents for drugs that they may and frequently do overcharge the public for, rendering them inaccessible to the people who need them the most? I recently wrote an article touching on that subject, or beginning to dive into that subject, for The Nation, and our next guest was instrumental in helping me understand more about this issue. He is one of our best experts on the topic, and with the introduction of a new bill regarding drug patents from Senator Bernie Sanders, I thought it was the perfect time to have him on the show. James Love, is the Director of Knowledge Ecology International here in Washington, D.C. He has an economics and finance background, and for many years now he has been working on the issue of drug company monopolies and the public good, as well as a number of other issues touching on intellectual property and the public good. And he joins us now. Jamie Love, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Always good to talk to you. And I wanted to talk to you specifically. Let's start with Bernie Sanders and his new proposal. Tell us a little bit, if you would, about that.
Well, I just saw the bill yesterday for the first time. It's Bernie's new proposal is one of several we've seen in the last couple of weeks by members of Congress to address this issue in different ways. Bernie's proposal would require people that receive government grants or the federal government itself to put a reasonable pricing clause in agreements that involve patents on government-funded inventions for drugs and vaccines.
So you have, for example, the one that we discussed for my Nation article, which was Sanofi Pasteur, French company. The United States military has been paying for research into a Zika virus, a virus for the Zika vaccine, which it now intends, you've been active in pushing against this, but the Army intends to give Sanofi Pasteur, as I understand it, exclusive rights to market a drug that was developed at a United States government expense, meaning that they can charge whatever they want for it with no restrictions. First of all, that seems off to me right there, because you're really talking about something that we paid for being charged back to us at potentially unbearable rates. But Bernie's bill would affect a deal like that, correct?
Yeah, I think the Zika vaccine was one of the motivations for his bill. We have some issues with the bill about what will be covered and what won't, but if the bill was to pass before the license is granted to Sanofi, it would cover that. The Sanofi case is pretty interesting because the company really can't make any claim they put any money into the deal. The U.S. Army came up with the original invention, and they have a long background in working in this area. The Army and BARDA and NIH, I think, have collaborated on the phase 1 trial, which was Sanofi was not involved, and Sanofi was brought in to conduct a phase 2 trial, and they're being paid $43 million to do that, and they've got an option for an additional $130 million to fund a phase 3 trial if the phase 2 trial succeeds. So all the way through the registration of the drug, Sanofi will have been paid for what it does, paid really well, and then if Sanofi registers the drug, they probably get a priority review voucher from the FDA, which is an incentive for developing drugs for rare diseases. And this is on the list of beneficiaries. This Zika disease is right now, even though it could be more widespread, but right now it's on that list. That'd be worth probably $100 to $200 million more. So Sanofi get paid to do everything they've done on the development by the taxpayers, and then they're resisting the idea that they would be limited. It's a very modest request I mean, there's different requests have been put to Sanofi on reasonable pricing, but the minimalist, the very minimum thing is to say that they wouldn't charge more in the United States than they charge to other high-income countries. And Sanofi is not willing to say that they would charge Americans no more than they charge other people in other high-income industrialized countries on something that was paid for soup to nuts by the United States government. I think it's just an astonishing America being bad deal that the Trump administration is trying to do.
Yeah, the guy who is supposed to be the master of great deals. And I think a lot of people listening to this, and again, we're talking to James Love, who head of Knowledge Ecology International, KEI, which is, I believe, keionline.org. I think a lot of people may not have processed how bad this deal is, so I'll restate it. The United States government pays for everything required, all the costs of developing a important drug or a needed drug, then gives it to drug companies who can then charge exorbitant prices for it, including charging Americans multiple times more than they might charge Canadians or the French or anyone else. And, you know, people might be listening to this and say, well, why is that even a thing? Why does that even happen in this country? That's so wrong. We shouldn't need a law to change that. But if we're going to have a law, why is it at all controversial? Why wouldn't 100 senators and every member of Congress vote for it? Is it lobbying? Is that what we're looking at here?
It's a funny case because it's a Swiss. I mean, in this case it's a French company, and
yeah, and I'm not thinking so much even about this one case. It's just this is not an unusual thing in this world, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's really the problem. Is it is not an unusual case, and it's something that we run across a fair amount, and so we're a little baffled why it's so hard to deal with this issue. I know that the head of R&D for Sanofi is the former head of the National Institutes of Health. So it's a former government official that's basically involved in negotiations. So there's that. They have a lot of lobbyists on Capitol Hill, even though it's a French company. I guess they can find some way to make political contributions through their American subsidiary or hire lobbyists or whatever they do that can do that for them. But this is a real, this is a really clear-cut case. We're involved in a large number of these cases. There's a case we're working on right now involving a pancreatic cancer, another one involving breast cancer, some different vaccines and things like that. Where there. This is the Army that's working on the Zika vaccine, but the National Institutes of Health right now, they're in the process of providing exclusive licenses for patents on liver cancer. As I mentioned, pancreatic cancer, these other cancers to these companies. Some of the companies are quite a bit different from Sanofi. Sanofi is a big company. Some of these companies you've never even heard of before. One of them has less than 10 employees and is located in Canada. And in all of these cases, they have no constraints in what they can charge. Sanofi charges for one drug that they sell for muscular dystrophy. They charge about 8 times as much in the United States as they do in France for the same treatment.
Yeah, it's just outrageous. And so Bernie Sanders, we've talked about his bill. You mentioned several other bills that have been introduced.
Right.
Could you tell us a little about those?
Well, yes. Senator Agnes King from Maine, he proposed some language in the National Defense Authorization Act when it was in committee in the Senate Armed Services Committee. That's a committee that's chaired by John McCain and that Ted Cruz is a member of. It's a lot of hawkish type senators that are part of this committee, and they adopted unanimously a requirement, and this would apply to Zika, and it would apply to Xtandi, that a requirement that the Department of Defense grant a compulsory license or use its other rights in the patents for any drug that was priced higher in the United States than 7 reference countries and high-income countries. So that was adopted in a committee report. It's directed to the Department of Defense. So we're really excited about that. And then Marcy Kaptor from Ohio offered an amendment which failed on a voice vote about 2 weeks ago in the House on the reauthorization of HHS that would have done the same thing. So we're seeing different members of Congress come up with proposals to address these issues.
Well, and my last set of last topic for you, and Jamie Love of Knowledge Ecology International, is should we be thinking a little bit more boldly about the whole idea of drug company patents? I know there was a law passed back in, I think it was 1980, that gives the government certain rights to step in when drug companies are not allowing drugs to be widely available to the public. Should we be treating this as more of a national crisis because drug costs are so out of control, people aren't getting the care they need? Should we be thinking about actually revamping the whole system altogether and maybe saying you don't get to patent a life-saving drug, you get a reasonable profit of 10 or 20% on your manufacturing costs, but we need to do this a different way? Should we be thinking boldly, I guess, is my question.
Well, I definitely think you should be thinking a lot more boldly. I mean, there's a lot of small ball that's going on drug prices. I think you could describe some of these NIH-funded drugs or Army-funded drugs as important and really worth doing, but the big picture involves a lot of drugs would not be affected by this. So if you look at the big picture across the board, the most radical and transformative approach, which we support, and is increasing, I think, getting support, is the idea that you do what that you radically change the incentives for drug development rather than link the incentives to the high price of the drug. So right now, if you invest and you're a successful inventor in a drug, the benefit you get is you get a temporary monopoly and you can charge high prices on that drug for a period of time. That sets up a conflict between innovation and affordability, or innovation and access, or innovation and fairness. And so you have to give up fairness, you have to give up affordability, you have to give up access in order to get innovation. We think that's a historic and fundamental and mistake that can be remedied. So then Senator Sanders, Senator Franken, 15 co-sponsors of the Franken bill have asked the national academies to look at whether or not you can completely delink the incentives to drug companies from the prices of drugs. And there's a UN high-level panel, which was appointed by the Secretary General, which made a very similar recommendation last year. And this is something that Joe Stiglitz, as an economist, and a number of other people have increasingly endorsed. So we think that you can reward people that are successful drug developers, but rewarding them through higher and higher prices is not, we think, a good way forward.
Okay, I think that makes great sense, and I know you guys have been thought leaders in this area, so thanks for all your fine work. James Love, Director of Knowledge Ecology International, which is at keionline.org. Thanks for that work, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.